It's just different. It's like in some ways school is better because I feel like it was just like generally more fun. Like even though it was also technically more work, it was like fun was built in almost. And now it's like work is like you have to intentionally have fun. I don't know. Work has definitely been kicking my butt. And the first 2 weeks, I don't think I left the office before like 7, 8 p.m. But it's getting a lot better now. I will say, like, it was weird at first because I felt like they knew and recognized my skills, but were not utilizing them. But I think now they're starting to utilize it. And like getting a little bit more, I don't know. It's like, I don't know how to describe it. I'm the new kid, you know what I mean? Like the recent grad, the like youngest kid in the room. And so like if anybody's stapling papers, it's me. Like if anybody's doing kind of that stuff, they'll be like, hey, can you go grab that from the printer? And I'm like, that's what I got a master's degree for. But like, and in that same, I'd say in that same energy, like it's also, it's just because I'm the new one, but then in some other ways, it's like random little moments where I'm like, oh, I actually know a lot about that. And I'll just like talk about it and they'll be like, oh shoot. Oh, the kid, yeah, that's what we hired him. Yeah, that's true. And I'm like, yeah, cool. Yeah, I don't know. I do miss school a little bit. I will say life is more expensive now because I think it's just like yeah, I'm working full time. I have money, right? And then I like go shopping and I look at my account and I'm like, like not me being more broke now. But then there's also the aspect of me like being at home and like not having rent to worry about. So I'm like, if my account hits 0, what's the worst that'll happen? But then there's the me like wanting to spoil myself at all things. Like I'm going to Atlanta and DC and weekend concert. I bought a PS5. Like there's all that. So I'm like, okay, I'm allowed to invest in myself right now. Let my account be at 0 and then build back up.
No, literally your Instagram stories like season passes to that like the weekend, whatever it was at like, what was that? Like Disneyland and then like Universal Studios and like nice meals. I'm like, okay, like graduated and sort of balling out down in SoCal, I guess.
Look. It's true. No, I'm definitely looking at my finances like, okay, Michael, we're gonna have to take life seriously. You only got one paycheck, we can't be you know. Ellie, you're in Sweden. How's that been?
It's good. I actually just got back to Sweden. I just told everyone my little food poisoning in Prague story, which was fun. But I've been, visiting family, hanging out. I actually had my first, like, hang out with friends, travel around in Europe summer. I feel like most of the time when I come to Sweden, I'm just visiting family. But my roommate came with me and stayed with my family for like a week and a half, which was really, really sweet. And then I was in Norway visiting our other friends. So it's been a blast, but definitely it's also been a lot going on. So I'm excited I'm back at my grandma's house now as of today. So perfect timing to schedule this call actually, because this is my first day not doing anything in a long time. She's our number one fan. Actually, she was asking me what my call was for. she's like, what's a podcast? Oh, it's about politics. Oh, okay. That was the extent of that. But no, I gave her the download. I was like, no, Michael's leaving. It's a really big deal.
Oh my God.
So actually, you should listen.
Tell her to come on, guest star
appearance. Oh my God, she'd be so stressed. She'd be actually so stressed. She's like definitely like eavesdropping right now, I bet. What about you, Demi? What have you been up to?
That is a great question. I feel like I'm like Michael 1 year later, because now I've been in this job for like a year. And so like, I'm changing jobs right now. So like, I feel like that's like part of it. So I'm like moving positions, like I'm at my same role and everything, but like, same kind of like amount of responsibility, but like way different sort of like profile as like in terms of like talking externally, and like I don't know, it's just like a lot. So I think just like that has been probably the biggest shift, but also really exciting. I also did like a little Europe travel, changed my life, and now no, it was really fun. It was a really good trip. It was also like a really wild trip. I've like Jared has like kind of gotten the lowdown, but like just a ton of terrible things happened, not because of the travel, but like during the travel. So as like nice as it was, I got back and I was like, I need a vacation.
Oh my God.
And I was like, oh wait, no. So that's kind of the current situation. I do head to California tomorrow. Yeah, so I'll get there tomorrow morning. I arrive in like LA. I don't know where y'all be, but like
So far from LA.
text me.
So far from LA right now.
I'm an hour and a half away.
You're
from
not.
LA.
I know you're not that far. I'm
Yeah.
staying the night in LA tomorrow night. So if you decide to just like skirt down, I'll be there.
I'll skip
Yeah, come skirt. I did just see The Weeknd last week, not on the weekend, actually on a Thursday, and it was amazing. It was so good. I already like sent Michael a full voice note, so I won't get into it, but it was just really, really good. And yeah, that's kind of like the extent of what's been happening. I'll be in California for 2 weeks. Definitely like Michael, like I feel you in terms of like the job thing. I feel like I wake up and then like get ready for work, and then I go home and I like calm down from work, and then like just go through that cycle all week. And then on Saturday, I'm like, all right, well, like don't do anything too wild because Sunday you need to like get ready for work. And that was like my whole life, but it's actually not that bad. Like work's actually really fun. I just think I have to like I just have to like make work fun. Like it's definitely like you have to integrate it like a lot more. It is like, whoa. And like you have to like totally dealing with like the pressures of like being like, okay, this is my life now. Like I'm not allowed to have like a bazillion extracurriculars. Like this is the extracurricular. And so yeah, that's like the main, I think like the main struggle. But overall good, you know, it's a nice extracurricular, so I can't complain too much. My boss has candy in her office, so shout out to my boss. And like that really, you know, it's the little things. So I will pass it to Mac.
This summer, I was thinking about like how I'm gonna phrase it while everyone was talking, but I had a lot of fun because I went on this little adventure to look at different national parks in the country. So I went down to Arizona and I saw the canyons up north in the state, and it was so beautiful. And then I went up to Washington and saw snow, which is like my first time seeing snow in July. And then I went to the sand dunes down south right by San Diego. It's the Imperial Dunes. So I don't know, Michael, if you've been before. It's not the ones by Pismo Beach. It's the ones that are like very isolated and really close to the border.
I know where they are. I've never been.
It was a lot of fun. It was very beautiful, but it was definitely in the middle of nowhere. The nearest town had a population of 2 and it was out for the season. So there was nothing nearby. But it was really pretty and I had a lot of fun. And then on the side, summer's like the only time where I have enough time to build or find a new hobby. So I've been trying to learn how to play alto sax, which has been really fun. Because I used to play the flute, so I have a little bit of an idea of how to work it, but it's been a lot of fun and it's been like a brain game. And so I have a list of songs that I'm trying to learn. So I've been trying to learn the theme from How to Train Your Dragon. And so it's been fun.
Should you do it for us?
It's not that good yet.
You should at least
You can
send a
just hum
recording
it.
over.
Yeah.
No, that could be our intro music.
Like if you're
Yeah, I'm with it.
Yeah. That's so good. We can just actually just put the How to Train Your Dragon cover.
Wait,
Like this
okay.
is my
I just noticed
no copyright.
what I felt like was a generational gap. I didn't realize How to Train Your Dragon had a theme. To me, those are books. You know what I mean? And then they like released a movie like years after the books came out, and it was kind of like,
Wait,
okay,
those were
here's
books?
the movie.
That's what I was about to say. I was like, I didn't know that.
No, because wait, when did that happen?
Demi, where are you at?
I don't want to oust myself, but I've never seen the movie nor read the books. So
Wait, I literally have copies of the books.
if someone brought me a dragon, I'd be clueless on what to do with them.
Hold on, We're taking this on the road. Go ahead, continue your discussion. We're finding my How to Train Your Dragon books. I'll go on mute.
Oh my gosh.
Heck, I've been playing the sax for a very long time, so if you need tips,
I'm
I
in
got
that
you.
phase where my notes, like the squeaking, is coming in every time I try to play. So I'm trying to learn how to balance. That's been my recent challenge.
We can obviously talk about this later, but basically what that means is that you're putting too much pressure between the reed and the top of the thing. The air has no way to go, so it squeaks out the corner. It just means you need to drop your jaw a little bit when you're playing.
Oh, we're keeping that in. Like master
By the way,
class.
unsolicited music advice.
Oh my god.
Oh, that was so good because it was so concise. Michael's been waiting for that question all
his whole life.
season.
Are you sure those came before the movies, Michael?
Well, those are for more like if you learn by reading versus like a visual learner. So I feel like maybe they could go hand in hand. Yeah.
For when you have a dragon to train, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I didn't see the movie, or the book, but I can only assume.
Just so you know, it's a really, really realistic, like it's a biopic basically of this woman who's training her dragon.
I've seen the commercials.
So like, there's a real dragon, right? And then she trains it, and then she does that a couple more times. So there's like How to Train Your Dragon, and then How to Train Your Dragon 2. And it just continues.
Don't you think
many different dragons?
Don't you think if she was like a good trainer, then she wouldn't have to do it twice? Like,
Well,
she'd really be
she's
taking
just
advice.
showing like with a few different types of dragons,
Oh,
the real ones that exist.
Okay.
That's what I was about to say. I was like, I don't remember.
I'm
was a
telling
she.
Debbie what How to Train Your Dragon is.
So all you need to do to train your dragon is you just need to let like a little wind come off the tip of your lip and just like open up your jaw a little bit and then just like stay it on your head and like wiggle it across your nose and then you'll be fine.
Yeah, sure. That's exactly how it'll work. I put in a link into the chat to the novel series, which started in 2003 and the movie came out in 2010. When I was in elementary school, I used to read How to Train Your Dragon. And when the movie came out, I was like, yo, this is nothing like the books. And then I never watched it again or touched it again because I still love the books. Anyway,
You're just like
I feel
super
strongly about
confused.
this because I literally bought them like in like middle school because I was like, oh, I love these so much. Anyway. But we are gathered here today. No, we are here for a purpose. And that is, unfortunately, this is my last episode with PolicyWise. It has been a long, incredible journey. And I remember when we first got started and the craziness and throwing ideas at a wall and, inviting random people and just shooting for the stars and it shaping up to be what it is today. And it's because of all of you. Not only all of us on this call chatting and our support in YLI and California Forward and our listeners and everybody else who's helped us who's helped us get to where it is today. And so I guess it's a thank you from me, from us, that we made it this far. And I remember when Demi and I randomly ran into each other on a call and we're just like, hey, let's catch up. And, long story short, it's how we got here. I don't know. Should I tell the story?
Yeah, tell the story.
Yeah, tell a story. For me, okay. We don't have to put this in the...
Demi, I need you to hop in, though, because I feel like you might have a different perspective on how it went down.
Okay, let's do like every other word.
How does it even work? Have you ever tried that before? Was that a novel idea? Anyway, it was California Forward's... first YLAC call. I think it was before it was called YLAC, honestly.
It was, and it was beginning of COVID.
Yep.
And Michael and I were...
April 2020.
Yeah. Both of us just lost in our Zoom screens. Our eyes met on the Zoom screens.
Oh my God.
We were like, we have an idea.
We hopped on the call and we're like, oh my goodness, haven't seen each other in so many years since, student government back in the day. And I think for some reason, I feel like you graduated before me, Demi, but I think we graduated at the same time. Yeah.
I was out of student government like after my junior year. So I feel like that's part of it.
Mm-hmm. So to me, you just kind of disappeared, and I just
Exactly.
graduated.
I was irrelevant after I left
Oh
student
my
government.
gosh! No, you chose to no longer show up, is what that was. Anyway, we graduated at the same time. She was graduating from Fresno State. I was graduating from San Diego State. We were both going to grad school in the fall at very different, but I'd say very somewhat notable institutions and programs specifically. And it was to the point where, like, I feel like if you're in like a list of programs, you know the other list of programs that are on that list. Does that make sense? Like, and so it's like, oh, you're going to the London school. Oh shoot, I'm going to the Goldman school. And we like both understand what that, exactly what would lead us to those decisions, I guess, so to speak. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. Demi always wanted the international thing. And she's probably looking at me like, okay, Michael always wanted the California thing. Anyway, so we just decided to catch up. I just moved to Berkeley. Like, it was probably like my first 2 weeks there, maybe 3 weeks. And I remember walking around campus. It was before I had Toto. And I was just by myself walking around campus and was just on this call. And Demi and I were just like riffing about all sorts of things, like the pandemic, student government, grad school, politics. Like, it was still the election of 2020, didn't happen yet. Like, it was the summer before. I think the Democratic primary just finished. Like, we had all sorts of like fodder of the flame and we're just going at it. And in the end, we're like, we should just record us talking, because we feel like there's so much in here that people just aren't discussing in the mainstream media. And that's really how it all began. And I think like that, coupled with like just people, whether, it's California Forward, and Tim was really central to YLAC back then. And so they really made us believe that we could do what we wanted. Like, if you have a good idea, just shoot it. And so Demi and I were like, well, we have a good idea, let's shoot it. And we shot, and had like a series of conversations with California Forward and YLI around, well, what would it mean to have a podcast about this new perspective that we have as we're transitioning to, like, from being like the passionate young people in the room, like the advocates, to like the professionals. And like, where does that unique perspective in being from a new generation that grew up with a whole different set of things, like recession by the time we were like 10, 11, like pandemic when we were 21, 22, election of 2016 when we were graduating high school or entering high school. And like, what do all of those things mean when it comes into the context of changing policy in the way that our world works? And I think there was also a good component of us sitting there being like, look, I think we recognize more than ever before that our leadership has no idea what's going on. And if you don't know what's going on, you can't tell me that I don't know what's going on. And so we both can be at this conversation, in a productive way, especially since COVID kind of upended systems. And so it was like, we're starting from the same point, and so we need to be included in a lot more of these conversations. And so I think starting PolicyWise, in at least let me put it in my mind, was like a way to at least start the conversation for getting young people involved in decisions that policymakers were making in such an uncertain time. I also think it was, to some degree, again, to me, like, if policy professionals can come here and have conversations with young people who are also really passionate about the same subjects and have the desire to create change about these subjects, then, and they can come here and have that conversation and realize like, oh shoot, like that was actually pretty good and this can be very productive, then the theory of change, I think, was that they would then start including a lot more young people in those conversations. I like to think it worked, and that a lot of our conversations like spurred a new energy of including us in what was going on, considering that we're kind of the demographic that is going to be impacted the most by long-term lasting decisions, especially such a crazy time. But I feel like I can go on that rant for quite a bit. Demi, is there anything add to the story? What did I miss?
No, I think you encapsulated it like really well. And I don't know, I feel like even like your storytelling of it helps just demonstrate what a strong storyteller that you've been and like have been to the podcast, and like your ability to kind of have a vision towards what this could have been from the beginning has really shaped it into what it is, and like hopefully you will continue to be, and you're the foundation, like you're you're like everything. So I think it's been inspiring and educational for me to get to talk to you, every week, just about things that are happening in the world, to us individually, to things that are happening to like our peers and other young people and policy professionals. It's just been a really, really wonderful period of time. And I'm just incredibly grateful to get to see all that you've been able to bring to anyone who listens to this podcast, including myself. And I'm just like so grateful to have locked eyes with you on the Zoom screen years ago when we were just lost souls trying to navigate the beginning of COVID and the beginning of grad school.
The story just feels like it goes between like a eulogy and a wedding speech every like 20 seconds, and I'm honestly like just so back and forth with the vibe. I'm crying, and then it's like when we locked eyes. I'm like, oh, period. Okay. Literally, I came to the podcast because I was like texting Michael. I was like, please bring me on to the podcast. And I was like, please, like, get me a position on PolicyWise. I feel like just like everything that we've said so far, and even just the like back and forth between like eulogy and wedding speech, I feel like that is just kind of the vibe of PolicyWise, is like the ability to like handle it's like such a wide range of topics with such a wide range of emotion. And Michael, like, you bring so much of that, and like having the youthful perspective to like really bring like a lightness and a freshness to like a lot of topics that have just kind of been like steady topics of conversation in politics for so long, but then also like handle really heavy topics with such grace. And then just Demi, you bring so much humor to the podcast, and it's just it was always such a treat to just listen to the episodes whenever they drop. And I think I wasn't the first ever released podcast episode, but I was the first guest ever recorded. So I like got kind of the intro taste to like what PolicyWise was. And since then, I was just like so excited about the potential of the podcast, and just having you both as hosts was just so phenomenal. And like you two specifically just like work so well as hosts, like with the energy. Yeah, no, I think that just is so the vibe of PolicyWise. And like what I think the goal is too is just like bringing that to policy conversations in general, like just the ability to like navigate with such a unique perspective and so much like tactfulness and grace, and also like humility and like deepness and humor when it's necessary. And I think that's just like so amazing, and that's why I always knew I wanted to be a part of PolicyWise. And it really, so much of that comes from you, Michael, and your ability to just like be such like a people person and also a policy intellectual, policy wonk as we use. And I think it's just like what I love so much about PolicyWise. And so there were a few weeks there where I like was hitting Michael up. I was like, so about PolicyWise, like, have you talked to anyone at YLI yet? Like, what do you think? And
I remember that.
Yeah, right? And now here we are.
You're too kind.
I think my first exposure to PolicyWise also came from YLAC. It was brought up in one meeting that this was being started. And that if anyone was interested, they should reach out. And so I think I did reach out to Michael and get back to him on the type of topics I'd be interested in. And one of them was education reform. And so I was invited to go and speak on one of the episodes with the state superintendent. And it was so nerve-wracking. I was so nervous. I was like hands shaking. But it was also a really exciting opportunity to actually be heard, which I hadn't been able to do. I was a senior in high school. I didn't really have a lot of opportunities to speak in a way where there was an audience, and there were actually people who wanted to hear what I had to say. And on top of that, I was speaking to somebody who was actually in the room when decisions were made about this topic. And so I think that that's when I got the idea that PolicyWise was just like a very, very cool concept and a very impactful one. And then I've been here since.
Okay. For our next topic, we all have to go around and we have to say what our favorite moment of an episode has been with Michael. This one time that Michael was talking on this one episode. And it was actually the episode that we were all in person. And it was when we were talking about our like ideal politician, or like there was some premise that was similar to that. And, you know, I think what's like one thing that's interesting about Michael and I's relationship is that it's like sometimes shocking to me that we were in like similar roles. Like Michael was, you know, actually kind of makes sense because Michael was like kind of like the king of the roles, and so like it actually makes more sense. But like sometimes it's like very shocking to me. I'm like, wow, our styles are like so different. Like, and then sometimes I'm watching Michael, I'm like, oh, he just has like so much confidence, and like he's so charismatic, and like he has like all these like, I don't know, like where did these thoughts come from and this confidence come from? Like this is so good. I remember we were talking about like whether or not the opportunity presented itself, like if we would like run for office. And I just thought about it. I was like, for sure Michael's gonna do it. I was like, for sure. I was just like to myself, I was like, I know he's gonna do it. And he did, but his answer was like so clarifying in like such a beautiful way that I think about it like probably like every other night. No, I was kidding. I think about it like often though. And I was like, wow, that is like so real. And it was just like a moment for myself that I was like, how did I not connect those dots? Like it just like made so much sense to me because like ultimately what Michael said is he was like, because I answered and I was like, you know, if it's my time, then like maybe like if there's no one who's gonna like do it like better, then I'll like step in. And I totally stand by that. But then Michael was like, it is my time. Like, hear me, look at me, like this is the moment and like I need to do it, and like I'm going to rise to this occasion because it needs to happen, and like I am doing it as part of something that is representing something so much bigger than myself. And I was just like, hell yeah, like that is right, like you're so right, like this is so sick, like I can't wait. I've always been like, yeah, for sure, vote for Michael, like, you know, like always been there, but at the same time I was like, yeah, like this is so beautiful. And the way that you put it together, like please, when we're editing this, just like actually dupe in what Michael actually said, like don't do my paraphrased version of that. But it was just like, it was just really, really good. And I still feel inspired by it. And I think it just made me feel really confident in Michael's future and just like the future of the Inland Empire and California, US, and maybe the world.
World rests on your shoulders, Michael. No pressure.
And maybe the metaverse. Just kidding.
All right, slow down. I'm just kidding. No, I just want to say that I appreciate all of you and everything that you said so far. And Demi, I do remember that moment, and I remember you saying something and me just being like, huh, I never thought about it like that either. So I feel like we had the same reaction to each other. I was like, oh shoot, like that's a good point. And Demi is always so like, she's intense in the most like non-intense way possible. I don't know how to explain it, but it's like the things that she says and does are quite intense, but it's like in such a lighthearted, like totally fine, don't even worry about it. But then you like sit back and you're like, yo, whoa, that was kind of, hold on. And she's like smiling and laughing, and it's like, oh no, you just did something actually quite quite serious, and you said something quite intelligent, but say it as if it was not intelligent. I don't know how to explain it. It's like,
He's actually smart. Wow.
Oh my god.
It's almost like, you know when somebody like says something to you really happy in like a really sad way, and you're like, wait, like that was actually a really good thing. I feel like she has that same energy when it comes to humility, but then like she's clearly extremely accomplished and knows a bunch of stuff, and will like very subtly bring up knowledge, and you'll just be like, yeah. Oh wait, dang, like hold on, Demi, how much do you know about this? And she's not the type to just like throw it in your face. And I feel like one of the things that I like learned from Demi was like not, because I feel like I tend to do that as soon as I know about something and it's like part of the conversation, like I must hop in, like I gotta go for it and just like get it off my chest. But Demi does it in such a way that like it's almost like you're uplifting others in the same conversation as you're contributing to, and I feel like that's something that I struggle, or at least I feel like I struggle with. And it's always interesting to hear other people's perspective on your work, because it's like, oh, I don't think about it that way, or like, oh, I thought I actually really struggled in some of what some of you are saying I do well. And I think it's always a good reflective moment like this. But anyway, I just commented on what Demi said. I'll I'll back away and shy back into my cave.
Yeah, that's not the assignment, Michael. No, it's so nice. No, thank you. And I like really resonate with. It's nice to. It's interesting to receive positive feedback on something that you're not super confident in. So I appreciate it a lot. How about you, Mehek?
I'm going to tie it back to the first episode I did with PolicyWise again. I'd say that that's my favorite Michael moment because it kind of set the standard of what would be expected from us, and what the podcast should look like, just because, again, Michael's very confident, and he combined this like large amount of knowledge with a way of saying it that's personable and makes people feel heard and is compassionate. He's like, the way that I think about it is like when I used to take debate classes, they teach you how to speak and say you need to do like this and that. And Michael is just like, he ticks every box in that sense, like just the way that he carries himself, and the way that he, acts like a leader, but he acts like a leader that you'd want to follow. And so I think that's hands down my favorite Michael moment.
Oh, it's so interesting again, because when I look back on those times, it's like me sitting there like, how the heck do we do this? Oh my goodness. Like, I guess this is what we're going to do. Fake it till you make it, my friends. Cause apparently I come off as confident.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Michael, what has been your favorite moment on the podcast?
Oh my goodness. My favorite moment on the podcast. Whew. That's a really tough one. I feel like it's really hard for me to get into one moment, but it's just like, this is the epitome, or like, this was it. But I think if I were to say, like, if I can alter your question, which you're totally not asking for, but I have no choice but to do anyway, and say like my favorite thing was feeling like every conversation we walked out of it with something completely different, whatever that is, a different perspective, a different knowledge of legislation, a different like X, Y, and Z. And there are times like, of course, that the listeners don't see, and most people wouldn't see, is like the text messages that fly back and forth between each other during episodes. And like, I think one of my favorite things, especially like, I love all of our episodes. I love all the people that we recorded with. Every time I record with Demi, I just gotta say that we have a different synergy where it's like our text messages, I feel like if anybody read them, would be like, what the heck are y'all saying? Like, it doesn't even like make sense to the normal human, but it would just be like, me, haha, yo, wait, pause, yo, hold on, let me go.
You go.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And it's like, it's so contextual between us, and it's like, we've gotten to that point. And so I feel like my favorite moments about recording is when we're all on the same page without even saying it. And then like, maybe I feel the need to say it either within the chat or whatever it may be. And it's just like, everybody's like, yep, we were already thinking it. And, or when somebody else says something and I'm like, oh, that's exactly what I was thinking. This is about to be so good. And then of course, I can't help at moments to get on my soapbox and start ranting about things, which I'm trying very hard to get better about because I feel like it soaks up so much space.
No,
but I believe we lovingly started
box.
calling them. Thank you. I've been improving the box itself. I actually decorated it last week.
Yeah, I love those jokes. Keep going.
I think we lovingly dubbed them Michael moments. They're just, I feel like every episode I'll just have like a moment and feel, it's like, I don't know, people don't, I think I can sometimes let it off, and I think this podcast was very much so an avenue for me when it comes to letting out very policy-centered things or things policy-wise in a way that is personable, because I think policy is emotional for me. I think I'm realizing like policy is a very emotional thing. It's not just like a technical thing or like an expertise, or it's just like, oh, I go to work and I do policy. It's like, no, this is people's lives. This is philosophy. This is like all sorts of things. And I felt like there's a lot of ways in which we don't discuss policy from an emotional perspective. And if you do, a lot of times you get written off. And so I feel like a lot of ways here I found found ways to bridge like the personable in conversation, but then also the very emotional things behind policy. And that's something I learned just now. Realized that I learned just now.
Yeah.
I'll get off my soapbox. There was a Michael moment.
Oh, we love the Michael moments. Well, it's funny because I've just been sitting and like reflecting on like what are my favorite Michael moments, like trying to distill it into one, and I like really can't.
No, you're too late.
No, I was
can't
about
do
to
it
say
anymore.
I can't anyway. So literally, shush. Thank you. What I was gonna say is that I can't do that because I feel like PolicyWise and the vibe of PolicyWise and like what I love so much about like what you bring to the podcast like carries over into like just our conversations offline too. And so I was gonna say that some of my favorite parts about working together on PolicyWise is we've now taken like 2 road trips like together related to PolicyWise. One time Michael and I drove down together to record in Fresno. The other time we drove to Santa Cruz to like just meet up with Will, who ended up being a guest on the podcast as well. And I feel like it was funny hearing kind of the origin story about PolicyWise and how it kind of started as a conversation and ended with like, oh, this should be a podcast, because that's how I feel in so many of our conversations is like we're just talking policy and life and all of these things, and then at the end I'm like, that was so insightful, like I've taken so much from this conversation. And I was actually talking to my other friend the other day. She was like, it's so funny watching you and Michael talk because it's just like you have so many questions for him. And I'm like, yeah, no, that is what it is like I'm just so curious about so much of your insight and so many of your takes. And I feel like our like offline friendship sometimes is just like a little continuation of PolicyWise, where like you're the guest and I'm the host, and I like have so many questions for you because you have just such a wonderful insight on so many things. And what you just said about yourself, like how it is so personal for you, is just like so refreshing and always like so wonderful to hear, because you do have such like a personal take, but then you're also able to like take a step back and like look at how it impacts more than just you and like what it means to so many people. And I think operating on those different scales is something that you're like able to like so seamlessly do. And I think that's what really like makes PolicyWise what it is in a lot of ways, is like being able to navigate all of those different levels. And so it's like so hard to pick one moment, because I feel like the core of what PolicyWise is also just like who you are as a person and like what you care about and like what you think about things and how you're able to have those conversations. And I think that's just like, it's totally something you carry with you in your life. And it's so exciting to like now see you graduate college and like start a career and like take that same energy and like perspective with you onto your next endeavors.
Oh, thank you. To be fair, just so everybody knows, I have a lot of questions for Ellie too.
It is true.
I would say I asked for a lot of opinions.
The other day, Michael texted me, he's like, I'm moderating this panel right now, and it's about environmental things. I don't know what they're talking about. Like, what does this mean? What does this mean? What does this mean? And it was like 4 a.m. in Sweden, and I woke up and I was like, oh no, I missed it. I missed Michael's time of need for me and my answers.
Yeah, I'm horrible at planning in advance. Oftentimes those things will happen. I'm like, yeah, I'm sitting here and they're talking about like ozones and like all sorts of stuff. Then I'm like, yes, important. Mm-hmm. I have no idea what you're referring to.
And I know you killed the moderating game anyway.
Definitely.
Yeah, I tried my best. And then after the call, I was like, so what's that? Like, I had no idea what y'all were talking about. But Ellie filled me in later on. And you know, I think as we get older and like, if there's something I want to let the listeners know, a few things. A is that as much as like PolicyWise really started from like just an idea and just like an organic conversation and a culture, so to speak, between Demi and I, and then really just like with a lot of support from Jarrett, Cody, Tim, everyone at YLI. And then, of course, when we were bringing in guests and thinking about expanding the team, and Ellie and Mehek were able to join. And all of these things came together and, of course, continues to grow the culture and to even shift it. And I think that was part of me saying, like, I think it's time. Is like PolicyWise is on its feet. I feel like it's like it needs a new vision, and I'm ready to support from the sidelines, and that the listeners are going to appreciate the whole new vision that you all decide to take it in, that the young people who are coming up will decide to take it in. It's like this recognition, this weird, like graduating grad school recognition of like, I no longer feel like I'm the youth that represents the youth, especially as I move into policy professional spaces as like a full-time employee. I'm like, I don't represent the perspective the same way. Like now I have a full-time job. Like I go to the office every day. That's not the same as how it once was. And I want to make sure, if anything, I would encourage that folks make sure and that the conversation stays as the young people who experience life as young people. Because now I'm no longer surrounded by young people the way I once was. And no longer having those conversations that are as invigorating, as energy giving. And just now I'm like, wow, I don't have this much energy at work, because it's like, do we even have these opportunities to get all personal with what we're doing, or is it all go, 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 go? And is there a way to even bring this type of energy into the policy professional workspace where people are just trying to make it through? They're trying to meet the deadline, but not necessarily thinking about how their actions and their moves are impacting, individuals and other people. And maybe that's another thing that listeners will hopefully take home with them and into their professional spaces. I'm just excited to see where this goes. And I'm happy to see that, what started as a crazy idea when we, called Tim and Amber and David, and we're just like, so Demi and I have a crazy idea that now we're here 2 years later. And, I feel confident enough to step back and just to watch and say, I'll keep on listening and see where folks decide to take it and trust that vision. It feels good. It feels good to help start something and then feel good enough about it to walk away. I think not enough leaders are able, and I'm trying to lead by example in my own personal, by being like, yeah, it's time for me to no longer be a voice of things and be able to support others. And if I'm going to make that ask of others, then I should be able to do it myself.
I respect that heavily. As sad as I am to see you go, I think it is like so, like the take space, make space, like, and I think it just, I'm curious, like what that's like growing from that like youth representative into like policy professional. Like, how does that feel? Because I feel like in some ways, I mean, obviously I'm like still like young, like 20, I'm in undergrad, but I think it was funny because for a while there, being in high school, like with the whole like climate activism thing, there was the whole like Greta Thunberg movement, like all these like 15, 16, 17-year-olds, and then going into college and being like, oh, like people aren't looking at me as this like, I don't know, like this like super young, like middle school, high schooler type thing. What's that like for you now? Like, I guess growing out or phasing out of like this part of your life. Like, is it scary? Is it exciting? Or are you like what does that feel like? Like, what potential do you think lies there in that transition?
Yeah, it's I'll be open and kind of say it the way I've been thinking about it lately. And this has happened, I think, to all of us, and I realized to me more than once, where it's like, when I transitioned from like middle school to high school, you got really comfortable in middle school. You had all your friends. I was a marching band kid. I had a marching band. Blah, blah, blah. I got into high school and it was like, and we started fresh. Like, at least I went to a high school that was like in a different like line as my other middle school, even though it was in the same school district. So I had no friends again. And I felt that same way when I went to college, like left everything I knew and just like started afresh. And personally, I feel like I've gone through every one of those phases and like decided, I had to think about, okay, who am I going to be in this space, and where is my best value add to this conversation or to this space? And I feel like when I entered college and realized like some of that's going to be in student government, when I left student government at the end of college and started grad school, I was like, well, where am I going to find my voice in my space? And ended up teaching and doing the podcast and like all these things that I also loved. And now I feel like I'm in that phase again where it's just like, I'm the new kid, I'm the newbie, nobody, like I feel fresh again in terms of who do I want to be now? Or, you know, where is my best value add to this conversation and to the people that I'm around? And realizing that it's different than what it used to be. And it's no longer like, oh, well, your value add being here is bringing in a different perspective or a youth perspective, or maybe sometimes a diverse perspective, or, you know, whatever it may be. Now it's like, oh, your value add here is like actually your technical skills. Like all those other things that your value add has been up to this point. Like, yeah, those things are cool, but like, can you run this analysis? Which is weird because it's like, oh, I do have those skills, don't I? That's usually not why I'm here. Even though it tends to contribute, but now it's like, oh, did I brush up on my technical skills enough to be, you know, to hold my water in this space? And how is that going to progress? And also realizing that progressing in the work world is so much longer than progressing in school. Like,
you're not going to say it. You got to just not let yourself be cynical.
Like, it's literally like, oh, well, you'll have your 1 year review.
Yeah, you're like, I'm used to getting feedback like every 3 to 4 months. Like,
I don't get a grade after the semester.
Yeah, what? No, totally.
And it's like, you know, not to, I hope people listening on this don't take it too to heart, but it's like watching some people who've been working in the same roles or around the same roles for 10, 15, 20, 35 years. And I'm like, is that about to be me? Like, and thinking like, okay, what does it actually mean to be in the career space? And how do I want to navigate this? And who do I want to be in the room? And all of these things. But again, like, it's almost like I'm walking in and I'm the newbie. I'm the fresh face. I'm the one who doesn't know anything and is like asking all the questions again. I'm no longer the instructor. I'm no longer, you know, helping lead the podcast. I'm no longer president of the association. I'm no longer, you know, VP at SDSU. It's like, oh, I'm the recent grad who knows how to do X, Y, and Z, and that's why he's here. Which is not actually how my work categorizes me. Like, I'm being kind of dramatic and kind of summarizing the way I've also heard other young people talk about the work world. They also value my other stuff too. Inland Empire Community Foundation, I love you. But it is again like a different value add to the conversation, which has been interesting to feel.
It's interesting. I think there's like a whole set of conversations that need to be had just like regarding that transition. Like, I think it's a really great question, Ellie, and like maybe it'll be part of Michael's guest starring in PolicyWiser is talking about.
No, yeah, you guys, Michael's actually leaving because he's starting a new endeavor, a new project. It's gonna be a vlog channel, and that's why he's leaving us.
Yeah,
right.
Vlogs when he's trying to reach an older demographic.
He's trying to get with the millennials.
Look, if you're trying to help me do that, and I'm kidding. Oh goodness, no.
Sorry.
Calling me old.
There's this question that I've been like considering recently, which maybe you've all considered, but I'm really would like to know what the major differences that younger folks feel like exist between themselves and like those just a couple years older, like kind of like in that, like maybe like a 5-year difference. Just like, you know, instead of looking like generation to generation, like really what are the differences that are going that rapidly? And I don't know, I think it's something for us all to think about, and that I'm going to give Michael as an assignment for the next time he's on PolicyWise
and for his vlog. That all the time. Michael, you're what, 4 years older than me? I feel like there's so many moments where we're just like, we're talking and all of a sudden it's like, that was not a generational divide, but there's a gap there for sure. It's always like humor. Like one of us will make a joke and it'll just like not land or something, and then we'll be like, wait, why didn't you think that was funny? Like, why aren't you laughing right now? Or like references.
Yeah, How to Train Your Dragon.
That whole intro convo, that was like, that pretty much encapsulated that, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny because like it's again this weird coming of age, I don't know how to describe it thing, where it's like, oh, I have that moments with people at work too, where they're just like, oh yeah, like this one movie, and I'm like, Like, what are you talking about? And then I like meet people younger than me, whether it's as little as 4 years or like maybe 10 years, where they're like teenagers, like just became teenagers, and they're like mention something, and I'm like, what? And they're like, oh, you're too old, and I'm like, that's crazy. That's really crazy.
I think there is also like a tiny like mentorship aspect, a little bit, like even in like I don't know, like Michael, you and I are like friends too, and I know you hate it when I'm like, oh, you're my mentor, because you're like, no, that's not what this is about. But I do think that like there is something about even just like 3 or 4 years of like experience, or like going through, like having already gone through undergrad and then being in grad school. I'm like, oh, what was your experience with this? Or like, how did this go for you? And just like, there is like even just that tiny little gap, like there's so much to learn from that, which is always like fun and exciting to talk about.
And I think I learned just as much by talking with you both, Mac and Ellie, that are years younger than me, where it's like, oh, that is a different
like,
perspective.
that's what y'all are doing now? Okay.
I just say that all the time. Like, is that what y'all are? For
okay.
real? That's crazy. I guess I should share some of the things that I'm doing nowadays. I am working at the Inland Empire Community Foundation as a government and community relations fellow, and adding to the policy team, which is fairly new. The foundation just started doing policy 2 to 3 years ago, and it's been a one-man show with my boss, and so him and I are kind of running the policy things, and it has been so much fun. We just started our biggest event of the year, the second annual policy forum, Inland Empire Community Foundation Policy Forum, where we pulled together hundreds of people from across the region, leaders, elected officials, nonprofit leaders, business leaders, young people, to come and strategize around some of the policy priorities for the entire region. And for the next few months, it is a big part of my task to come up with what the policy priorities are in consultation with folks from the community, and to be, kind of listening to people and coming up with, well, how do we want to tackle this next legislative session? How do we want the foundation to strategize around some of the priorities that have been lifted by the people that live within Riverside and San Bernardino counties? And as challenging as that can be, it's also like awesome, because we're uplifting nonprofits, we're uplifting our elected officials, backing them up in the Capitol in some sort of ways, fighting for the community. And this is just something that our region has not necessarily been the strongest in. And there's a lot of metrics that guide that. I think the last statistic I heard was 1 in 10 philanthropic dollars that come to California will come to the Inland Empire, which for the size of the region, which it is, it's kind of quite low. I need to double check that stat before it really gets sent out there. So let's be careful on that. But I know that when it comes to philanthropic dollars, our region is one of the least funded. And part of it is that we haven't necessarily been as strong when it comes to organizing for funding opportunities and for collective efforts. And of course, when you're together, you go farther, and you're able to make bigger asks of the state, of the federal government, of your elected officials, and coordinate with them on how to actually bring something in. So anyway, that was a short little rant on some of the things that I do now.
And Michael's personal life can all be seen on Instagram at Wiafe. That's where you get the good stuff. That's where you get all the like food pictures and current favorite songs, if that's what y'all are into. So just so y'all know.
And the Inland Empire Foundation has an Instagram now, right?
They do. IE Gives. Follow us at IE Gives. We do a lot of cool things to follow what we're doing.
So PolicyWise is about bridging the gap between policymakers and young people. And so now you're working on bridging the gap between the government and the community. So what would you say is the solution to those gaps that exist, and what do you think causes them?
Wow, that's a really good question. I think there's a lot of things. So, and I'll just name a few, and I promise I won't take forever with this. I think one of them is just the way that politics works. It just works differently. It's not always intuitive, and so I think that's a big thing. Second is historical things, like just people have sometimes had a hard time working together for one reason or another. Maybe battles between maybe elected officials few years ago were opponents in another race and now they refuse to work together, or like little things like that actually make a big difference in how the community is able to kind of coalesce behind things that are really important. And oftentimes, like, we don't recognize that, like, an individual legislator actually needs community support to convince their other legislators. Like, it's once the legislator has it, it's not like they just do their thing. It's like they also have to convince their colleagues, and a lot of times they need the community behind them in order to bring it to the finish line. I think another thing is just like knowledge of how it works. Like, as I mentioned kind of before, it's like the legislative cycle. Like, if you have a bill, don't go to Sacramento in October. Like, it just, like, that's just not when things are happening. And so you have to know when, where, what, how in order to be most effective in pushing things through. And I think, like, at least when it comes to organizations, nonprofits, especially more grassroots, they might not know kind of the ins and outs of how to run things through the Capitol. And that alone will kind of cripple the ability for the community to engage in an effective way with the government. In the way that needs to happen. Another thing is just like time and money, like in terms of like the ability for organizations, like, I'm lucky enough to work at a foundation that considers it, kind of one of the newer priorities of the past few years to bring in policy expertise. Not all organizations have the funding to do that. And because of, how difficult it can be, like, policy is not cheap in some ways. And so they might have to get a grant for it. They might have to get some other funding. They might have to rely on another organization, like, let's say the foundation, to provide some of that expertise and some of that information. And then, of course, there's leadership, and the thing I said a little bit earlier about, knowing when to step out of the way. So I think that there's a lot. There's a lot that comes into it. Every community is different. We operate within 2 different counties, and I would say even the counties are really different in how they operate. And sometimes it's all about having a collective vision. And I think that's some of what we're trying to get tables around to build, is a collective vision that we could push. Can I also, okay, now I'm thinking about this stuff. I think it's also tough, especially for like nonprofits, when like the funding environment is competitive, right? It's not just like, oh, well, we're just having a hard time working together. Like, no, it's like, oh, this one application we're both applying for it, one person's going to win. And so like that automatically makes the environment less collaborative. And so the funding environment is competitive, which makes it harder for folks to work together. And then, like, as I said, the same thing's happening with legislators, right? Maybe somebody killed somebody else's bill. Well, now they're having a hard time collaborating. And who's the loser in all this? It's the people. And so some of these things are tough to cut through. And then I also think, oh, dang it. Now, see, I have a list of things. Okay. Last one I'll mention is that it tends to be that the communities that need to be part of the conversation, that can best guide where things go and where, like, what needs to happen, oftentimes don't have the time, energy, or resources to actually be there, or are not offered that to be there. And so a lot of also the work is power building. It's power building within communities. It's giving people their own voice to sit at the table. It's not just being the voice for them. It's being like, hey, let me help you out in building your voice so that you can also come to the table with us. And so I think that's a big challenge too. It's like, oh, well, we want to do it with community. Well, where are you going to find them? Well, okay, well, that mom has 3 kids, but we want her perspective, but we don't have the money to pay for it, like to take her time away. And so there's just so much that comes into it. And so it's breaking some of those barriers and finding a new way of doing business. I think that's some of what we're doing, is finding a new way of doing policy business in the region.
I think that when I was asking this question, I think fundamentally what I was thinking of is that a lot of gaps that exist, whether it's between the community and government, or whether it's between government and young people, is because of the individuals not being heard. And I think that that's what's so great about PolicyWise, is because it's giving a platform for people to be heard, and a group that typically doesn't feel that way, which is young people. So I think it all kind of ties together really well in that sense.
Yeah. And I know I said that was my last point, but you just raised something so good, which is like, it's not only that people aren't being heard, it's that people are being heard and their words cannot effectively translate to what's happening in the political and policy world. And so you could have people like, for example, we've been having a lot of protests around a lot of issues, right? Abortion access. Those, you can go to a mayor in California and, you know, be knocking down City Hall about abortion access, and they're just going to look at you and be like, okay, like, what am I supposed to do about that? Because at least in the municipal mindset, especially after Supreme Court thing, like, the city, there's not much that they can do other than increase access, which in California here, just about it's already there. And so they're just going to thumbs up you, right? Because like we're doing all we can. And so it's knowing like, well, maybe it's in a specific area, or maybe we need to focus particularly on this one piece of legislation, or maybe we need to, and so it's getting that voice and then refining it in such a way that it's like, okay, let's actually make this actionable. Because I've realized that in a lot of spaces, it's like, well, people want all of these things. It's just that the way and the timing of which it's being fought for doesn't work with the government's timing in way in which it's being pushed. And so it's finding that type of alignment. And so it's like not only having your voice heard, but it's like having your voice heard when the microphone is on, if I could put it that way. Because if you're talking when the microphone's off, it's like you're talking, but your voice is being carried. They might be able to hear you, but it's not going anywhere. Microphone's on. Oh, this is the time. As one of my professors says, it's like one of the most important thing for policymaking is knowing what time it is. Just knowing what time it is. And that alone will go very far. And so some of the work is also like keeping your eye on the watch and being like, okay, it's time for us to push this because this is the time for it to happen. Abortion rights has been pushed for a really long time in a lot of different areas. Now is the time to be talking about it because now it's hitting the mainstream. Things are happening and it's being stripped away. Like now is the time for it to really be at the top of the ticket. And for some people, it just wasn't time yet. And so like part of it is knowing what time it is. And anyway, I maybe gone down a rabbit hole I didn't need to go down, but I'm getting emotional about it again.
You're just setting yourself up to be a stellar guest come a few years from now.
Yeah.
As Cody said, you're already the policy expert. I mean, I guess to kind of preview that, I feel like it would be kind of appropriate for your send-off to be the closing question that we ask all of our guests, even though you're not necessarily a guest right now. But oh, so sorry, Michael. You've got to think on your toes on this one. But what is your key takeaway message for young people listening to this episode? What wisdom, what policy wisdom, just kidding, any sort of wisdom would you bestow upon our young listeners?
I have so much to say, and that's the hard part, that I always have so much to say. I think if there was one thing I would tell young people, it's that not everybody's going to believe in you. In fact, it's more likely that they won't than they will. And that's not necessarily what you need in order to be successful. And there's a lot of ways in which you are being pushed away from chasing exactly what it is you need to chase. Which means that you have to find your own internal fire, whatever that may be, and don't let anybody put it out. And, I've had moments where it's like, I have a fire, somebody puts it out, and now I move on to the next thing. And then there's a moment where I'm like, wait, I had that fire and, now it's coming back. But had I just let it keep on burning when it needed to keep on burning, I would have been in a different place and possibly a much better place. And I think that oftentimes, especially today, when we're hearing so much in the news, when we're seeing leadership not step aside, when we're seeing all of these things that are basically telling young people that the world is getting a lot worse and that all of these things are happening, and we're seeing we're basically falling into pits of despair sometimes on social media, doom scrolling, all of these things. It's that you can find agency in your own internal fire, and maybe you can't change the world. And the reality is that most people won't change the world, but that you can find change in your own community. You can create change in your own home. You can create change in such a way that impacts your surroundings the way that you need it to be impacted. And that isn't necessarily always the things that are going to be all across the board, or all around the world, or the things that people are going to recognize either. But it's like work is meaningful work, whether people know you're doing it or not. And that was one of the best advice that was given to me a few years ago. And it's something I still carry to this day is good things happen you need to do good things whether or not people know you're doing good things. And part of that comes from keeping your internal flame alive and not letting other people put it out and try to change it in a direction in which you think it's theirs. I'd say listen to advice, but don't adhere to it. And until you've chewed it up in your own mind and you get to spit it back out in the way in which you see fit. Everybody's perspective is necessary, whether or not you know everything that's going on or you're brand new. It's all very important. I can keep on going on for the next hour, so I'll just stop here. Hopefully that made some sort of sense.
That was so good. I think that was also just like a perfect encapsulation of your journey moving forward too, which is like, you know, as you move on, we said earlier about this, like, you don't have the same consistent milestones or accolades or feedback. And I think knowing your fire as you so clearly do, Michael, and carrying that with you and like having that vision and being confident in that is so important. And so wishing you all the best with carrying that on with you. And I can't wait to see what you do. And I'm so excited that you started PolicyWise and that this is your little baby that's now growing and changing. And yeah, I'm just so grateful that we've gotten to share this room with you and excited to see where you take it next.
Thank you, Ellie.
I just want to say that I'm really sad. Like, I'm genuinely like emotional that I won't get to talk to you every week because you'll ignore all my calls. And I was kidding. No, I'm really gonna miss working with you all the time, and I'm so excited to be your chief of staff in the future. And I just think that we just have a really good foundation going forward. And selfishly, yeah, I'm just really gonna miss you. So
look, Demi, 15 years, you're gonna be on a Zoom call, and you're gonna lock eyes across the Zoom call, and Michael's gonna call you. He's be like, chief of staff.
I'm like, Mr. Emperor.
Oh, goodness.
Emperor.
You come over there, it was king earlier, emperor, look, pharaoh next, what's going on? I'm just kidding, Demi, appreciate you.
Oh. You're like, oh, actually, I like the sound of that, pharaoh.
Not while it's recording, Demi. I'm joking. I really would appreciate if everyone called me pharaoh. Random. I've been playing a lot of Assassin's Creed Origins, and it's set in Egypt, so that's what's at the top of my mind. Sorry.
When do you have time for that? When?
2 a.m. in the morning.
Boy.
Oh no.
Take it away.
Mac, any last words? That sounds awful.
Any last
No,
words?
I'm a very sentimental person, so I'm a little down, but I am excited for you.
Thank you.
We all about to start crying.
I'm trying my best not to. But thank you all for all the kind words and the compliments and making me feel so good about the work that's happened so far. And I do feel really good about it. And thank you to the support, Jarrett and Cody and Tim and everybody else at YLI for really helping make this happen. And Amber and David and folks at California Forward for helping us kick it off. I just wanted to point out from what I said earlier, I just want to say Demi said, "I'm so sad" while laughing in such a happy voice. This is exactly what I'm talking about by Demi saying something in a voice that's like completely different from the words that she's saying, but you still really get the point. Like, she really is sad, and you understand that. But anyway, I just wanted to say that you just did that. And for the last time, I'm closing out a PolicyWise episode. Thank you for listening up until this point. Thank you for listening to season 3. Let me say thank you for listening to my voice for these past few years, seasons 1, 2, and 3. And you can follow up on Instagram, on social media with the rest of the team and anybody else who will join in the coming future for updates on season 4. I'm looking forward to listening as well. Thank you.
This was PolicyWise, an intergenerational podcast by Youth Leadership Institute focused on bringing young people into the policy conversation.
Don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at PolicyWisePod. If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to discuss, please slide into our DMs or send us an email at policywise@yli.org.
And stay tuned for upcoming episodes.